12 years ago now. And it got a new life. It's not in the memoir anymore, but it got a new life in this. I'm going to read all of it, which is 3,000 words, so it'll take about 20 minutes, which is very long for reading. Reading to generally 5 minutes, 10 minutes maximum. 10 minutes is most I've ever done a reading for, so I really hope it doesn't drag. It might do. I apologise in advance if it does. I should also warn you there's some dark themes in there and some swearing. Towards the end, there's a scene with dialogue between teenagers, which has some offensive bits in, as teenage boys tend to be. But that's about it. It starts in the car and ends in the car. When we return to the car, there's a scene break, so I'll put in a pause, which is not going to be no dramatic. It's not the end of the story. It's just to signify a scene break. So it's called Play. I'm torturing my dad, Colin. We are in the car. My method of torture is as follows. I make him listen to a cassette tape on repeat. The tape is an album called Chorus by a band named Erasure, a band Colin doesn't much care for. I know this because he tells me so. He says, Adam, I don't much care for Erasure. I make him listen to them anyway. My reason for torturing him is this. He deserves it. I didn't always want to torture my dad with music. Once I had been happy to listen to music he liked. In fact, his music saved my life. His music saved my life when my mum wanted me dead. She missed a chance though, my mum. I'd already been hiding in her belly for over 6 months before she found out. Most mums find out when they miss their period. Not my mum. Years of shooting heroin had already stopped it. The other warning signs of being pregnant, tiredness, dizziness, throwing up, were simply part of her everyday life. She was 21. Not until her belly began to bulge did she suspect something wasn't right. She visited the doctor and told him to remove the unwanted bulge at once. But her doctor said that she was too far gone. Abortion now would be dangerous and illegal. My mum didn't let that put her off. She knew of a man in London, a man who did not care about the law or danger, a man who would happily take care of a problem for a price. She sat on the train from Manchester to London with me in her belly, hoping the man would be successful and swift. The man was neither swift nor successful. He wasn't there. My mum, Martine, arrived at his office to find it empty. She never discovered whether he'd been shut down or put in prison or was just taking the day off. But when she got back on the train to Manchester that night, I was still alive. Martine wasn't about to give up though. She was persistent like that. She upped her daily heroin intake, which was already considerable. By the end of her pregnancy, she had to inject it into her groin. All her other veins had collapsed through overuse. She also began punching herself in the belly. When her arms grew tired, she ran into walls. When that didn't work, she threw herself down the stairs. Her belly became black with bruising, yet continued to expand. I had my dad to thank for this, my continued existence. He was comforting me, giving me strength to get through the daily attacks by playing me music. He had always used music to give him comfort and strength. His records helped him endure his unhappy years in boarding school, where the dorm masters made him touch their willies. When he played me his current favourites, Iggy Pop, David Bowie, Joy Division, he was passing on a tool for survival. And it worked. I was born healthy and strong. I shouldn't have been. I'd shared my mum's poisonous blood for 9 months and I was supposed to be born addicted to heroin. I should have spent my first few weeks fighting for life, shaking, sweating, being sick, as I was weaned off my addiction with morphine or methadone. Martine may then have identified with my struggle and stayed in the hospital with me, giving up the heroin too. We could have bonded over our shared withdrawal experience. Our efforts may have inspired Colin to give up also, and the three of us would have stayed together, happy and heroin-free. I wasn't born addicted though. I had defied my mum again and she didn't want to know me. She wouldn't touch me. She wouldn't look at me. She certainly wasn't about to give up heroin for me. On her second day in hospital, she had Colin smuggled in a hip. The following day, she checked herself out so she could return home to a regular supply. Martine kept taking drugs and so did Colin. But after a few years, he couldn't take any more. He knew he had to stop or he would die, so he ran off to a different city, Newcastle, and got clean for a while. My mum couldn't look after me on her own, nor did she want to, so her dad, my granddad, took me in, putting off his retirement so he could afford it. A few more years passed. I started primary school. My granddad became my legal guardian. We moved into a council flat after our previous house got knocked down. My mum came to visit us every now and then, but usually she was too busy shooting up or getting drunk after she swapped heroin for booze, or being in prison. And the only time I would see Colin, now using again, was in the odd school holiday. I'd take the train to him in Newcastle, and for several days we would go to the park, go toy shopping, watch films. At night he'd read to me and play me his records. I was reunited with the old gang, Iggy Pop, David Bowie, Joy Division. I was happy to listen. Colin enjoyed all the benefits of being a temporary parent. When I was back home in Manchester, I would build an image of him from only the very best memories. In my daydreams, I never thought of how thin he was, how pale, how his eyes were glazed and bloodshot. I didn't think of the ugly marks down his arms or how he wanted to sleep all the time, not once. In my dreams, he was always awake, always laughing. In my dreams, he was strong, he was calm, he was perfect. But then Mary came along. Mary waddled into Colin's life when he was trying to beat his heroin problem for the second time. Mary was older than Colin, American, and drove a rubbish car. I didn't much care for Mary and told her so. I said, "Mary, I don't much care for you." In truth, I had never much cared for any of Colin's girlfriends, or his female acquaintances, or even the checkout girls who made conversation with him whilst giving in his change. They were all competitors for his time, which, for me, was limited to a few days for school holiday as it was. There was also the fear that one of these evil women would somehow turn him against me, a fear that became a reality when Mary appeared. I remember when I first met her. I was about 8. I was visiting Colin for the school holidays. Colin wanted Mary and me to bond, so he took us both to sea houses. During the day, we went on a sightseeing trip that combined two of my favourite things, boats and seals. I spent the entire boat ride ignoring Mary, wondering why Colin was with her. Why would my dad, who had been certain was both perfect and indestructible, choose such a woman? Maybe he wasn't perfect after all. And if he wasn't perfect, he may not be indestructible. He would die one day. It was the first time I had considered this. It was all I could think of for the rest of the boat trip. It was all I could think of on the walk back to the bed and breakfast. Later that night, I went to Colin and Mary's room, which was next to mine. I knocked on the door. I entered. He wasn't there. Mary lay on the bed by herself, a mug of coffee in her hand. "Where's Colin?" "In the bath." She blew on her coffee, not looking at me. "Oh," I said, and turned to leave. I couldn't wait any longer though. I needed answers. "Can I lie on the bed with you?" "Mm-hmm," Mary said, in a way that suggested she really wished I wouldn't. I lay next to her. I had nowhere to rest my head. All the pillows were stuffed under her back, so I leaned on a bloated belly, facing her toes. At least that way she couldn't see my face. Her whole body tensed. She wanted me to get off her. I knew she did, but she didn't say so. "Is Colin going to die?" We all die one day, she said, sipping her coffee, which made her belly gurgle and grumble. I tried to say something, but I couldn't speak. I felt sick. Even me. I didn't want to die. I didn't want Colin to die either. He won't die yet, she said. Colin will probably live until he's 90. 90? 90? Surely he was already nearly 90. I wanted to hear that he would live forever, or at least another 200 years or so. I started to cry, my body shaking all over. Colin didn't see me crying, but Mary must have told him all about it later, because he didn't want to know me after that trip. He went away for 4 years. Actually, he didn't go anywhere. He stayed where he was, in Newcastle, but he wouldn't let me visit him anymore. For 4 years, I didn't get a phone call, a letter, or even a birthday card. Nothing. What had happened was this. Mary married Colin the first chance she got and told him to break off all contact with me. She also told him to grow a beard, so he looked less boyish. He threw away his razor and listened to her argument for throwing away his son. She suggested that if he wanted to beat his heroin problem once and for all, he should avoid reminders of his past, his guilt. Seeing me reminded him of the past and made him feel guilty for leaving when I was little. Mary assured Colin it was for the best. She said, "Colin, it is for the best." He considered it and agreed, cutting all contact. If I hadn't cried on the bed with Mary, he may have decided differently, but my weakness of character had made me, in his eyes, as disposable as his razor. They moved to a country house outside of Newcastle, Mary and Colin did, and the only reminder of either of them having a previous life was Mary's 2 dogs. Colin was safe in his little husband-wife cocoon, protected from memory, guilt, and crybaby sons. But after 4 years, it all collapsed. Mary waddled back to America, and I got to speak to him again. I was even allowed to stay at his house in the country. I began to dream, as I had when I was younger, of Colin and me building our own cocoon, a father-son version. As it turned out, he now only wanted a pod for one. This became obvious when I got to his house. I was reminded that I was not at the top of his list of interests. Music held that spot. Colin's record cover images outnumbered photos of me by several thousand to nil. He gave me a chance to be part of his musical world, though. He said I could have one of his albums. I could choose anything I wanted. I could have picked Iggy, Bowie, or Joy Division, embracing our shared history. Or I could have chosen one of his latest favourites, Depeche Mode, R.E.M., Primal Scream, and we could have begun an exciting future, discovering new music together. But I chose Erasure, the tape in his collection he disliked the most. The Erasure album had been an unwanted present from someone with bad taste, someone who didn't understand music should be serious and dark, who didn't understand that Colin's collection had no place for such poppy twaddle. Erasure didn't fit in at my school back home in Manchester any better than they had fitted into Colin's music collection. For a class project on the topic of our choice, I picked Erasure. My presentation consisted of me explaining to the class why they were the greatest band on the planet, and then giving proof by playing their 3 best songs on the tape player. The class weren't convinced. They were all boys. We were at an all-boys school, so they had to be. And when my presentation finished, they just sat there, staring, apart from Scott Briley, who couldn't stop laughing for some reason. "Right," Mr. Sweetman had said, leaning back in his chair, his pen in his mouth and his hands on the back of his head. You could see the sweat patches under his armpits. "Any questions?" "Yeah," Scott Briley said, laughing. "What the fuck was that?" "That's not a proper question, Briley," Mr. Sweetman said. He didn't tell Scott Briley off for saying fuck, like all the other teachers would have. Mr. Sweetman didn't care about swearing, or the rules. He often had the top button of his shirt undone, and his sleeves rolled up. "Okay," Scott Briley said, looking serious as he formulated a proper question. "Why did you not mention that they're massive benders?" turned to Mr. Sweetman, who said, "Answer him then, Charlie." "What do you mean?" I asked Scott Briley. "I mean, they're obviously homos, so why didn't you put that in your little speech?" He didn't know what he was talking about. Vince Clarke, the keyboard player, was a bit funny looking, but all the women must love the singer, Andy Bell, who probably had loads of girlfriends. Being a ladies' man, they called it. I'd heard people say that about Colin. "Andy Bell is a ladies' man," I said. "A lady boy, more like," Scott Briley said, and the rest of the class laughed. Christopher Kevill pretended to sneeze and shouted "puff" at the same time. "I'd never listened to shit like Erasure in a million years," Scott Briley said, "but my uncle knows all about them. He says they're definitely a pair of benders, and anyone that listens to them is a bender too." I looked at Mr. Sweetman again, who was swirling his pen around in his mouth and nodding, like he agreed with Scott Briley's uncle. I considered what Scott Briley had said. Now that I thought about it, Andy Bell never referred to women in his songs. He usually just sang something that could describe a man or a woman, like you, or darling, or lover. And in one of their live videos, he did wear a blue sparkly cowboy hat, covered in sequins. He also wore matching cowboy chaps with no trousers on underneath, showing his bum cheeks. That did seem a bit odd. Maybe Scott Briley's uncle was right, and maybe Colin thought the same thing, that listening to Erasure might make me gay. Colin always seemed proud of how easily he could make women smile and do other things, and clearly hoped I would make women smile and do other things, just as easily one day. He really wouldn't much like the thought of me being gay. He would hate it even. Thanks to some heavy traffic earlier, we are now listening to my Erasure album for the third time. We are just over halfway through. Colin grips the steering wheel with both hands, leaning over it while staring at the sky, as if praying for someone, something to end his ordeal. He now carries the guilt from running away when I was little and from breaking contact for 4 years. The guilt prevents him from speaking up, from ending the ordeal himself. The sixth track, Love to Hate You, repeats its dramatic chorus one last time and then fades to silence. We aren't too far from his house and there is no traffic now. We probably just about have enough time to make it to the end of the album again. But then he finally speaks up. He can't take it anymore. He pauses the tape and suggests we listen to something else. "How about some Iggy or Bowie ads?" he says. He's reaching out. His eyes say, "You remember Iggy Pop, don't you, Adam? I played him to you when you were in your mother's womb, fighting to make it out alive. It saved your life." His eyes say, "You remember David Bowie, don't you, son? We listened to him when he used to stay with me. We were happy then. We can be again. Just give it a chance." His eyes, soft and pleading, know things can be different. You can forgive, they say. I look at him closely and I see it too. A different path. I see us putting on Iggy or Bowie, singing along and playing air guitar for the rest of our days, together. I see us in our own father-son band, him on vocals, me on bass, happy. I see us sharing albums, sharing passion, sharing our lives. I see a future for us after all. A future with no more guilt, no more resentment, where our music will always play, our song will always be sung. I see it. I can forgive. Just take the Erasure tape out of the player, his eyes say. Put something new on. Let's start again. But before I can agree, I look down from his eyes and into his thick brown beard. I think of how much I like the next song, Turns of Love to Anger. I think of my mum and how things may have been different for her if she had just run off to a different city, like he did. And I think of being on the bed with Mary, crying, knowing for the first time that Colin would die. My dad will die and I'll be left alone. Again, I lean forward. My finger skips over the eject button. I press play.
thanks to Maisie for the lovely introduction. Thanks to Paul for filming, love Paul, and making lovely posters and all the support of Morrington in general. Thanks to Sam being behind the bar. Thank you, Dan and Ross again. Brilliant. There's some books at the front if